I almost missed the video this week, but I wanted to talk a little bit about perfectionism, mainly because that is kind of what I had to get over to get this video out there. If you're new here, my name is Jarle, and on Early Owl we learn how to not be perfect. So I think perfectionism rears its ugly head in a couple of different ways. One that is kind of very close to the meaning of the word is if you're working on something and you're kind of never happy with the result and you end up never releasing it, that's an obvious kind of perfectionism. The other type of perfectionism that I want to focus a bit more on today is maybe a bit closer to idealism, even though I know those terms are probably a bit interchangeable. But how I think about it is that perfectionism at the end is like, okay, you're never finished with an end product, but idealism kind of comes in before you've even started something. And it's this force that kind of pushes against you and kind of makes it harder to get started because you have this subconscious ideal in your head that you kind of want to work towards. But it's very hard then to take kind of the first step to beginning because you feel like you have to be on the path to reach that ideal. So this type of perfectionism just comes in all sorts of different resistances you feel against getting started on anything. I think there's two key ingredients to kind of summon this type of perfectionism that makes it hard to do things. One is that there is some kind of evaluation process where the output gets judged by someone. It could just be judged by yourself, or it could be that you have to hand it in somewhere or that you have to post it publicly like this video. The other factor, which I think can make this perfectionism more pronounced, is if what you're doing is more subjective and is more about personal expression than it is about kind of a black and white, right or wrong type of thing. So you're a lot less likely to feel this kind of resistance through perfectionism if you're doing something, say like your taxes, where you just have to do it and it's just right or wrong, compared to if you're doing something like creating a piece of art or a YouTube video or something where there is no clear right or wrong answer or clear right way to do it. You just kind of have to put yourself out there and try it and see how it goes. So then the question is how to combat this type of perfectionism. I will say I definitely still struggle with it, and I've noticed it like a lot more since I started doing the drawing and then doing the YouTube videos than I ever did in my previous life where I was mostly doing programming things. Because as I said, with programming, it is quite easy for me to sit down and do, and I never feel like I have to put myself into it or like be perfect. I just have to get it right and then improve it. But I do think there are a few things you can do. The first thing that is important to do is just to actively be on the lookout for it and try to kind of combat it before it takes a hold. So you should be especially on guard for this if you're doing something more subjective or personal. For the evaluation part of it, if there is a built-in evaluation, like you need to hand something in or it's for like a client or something, then obviously you can't get away from the evaluation process. But if you're doing something for learning or for yourself, then you should be very conscious if you're having a hard time getting started on something to disconnect from the evaluation process. Like you can't completely stop judging yourself, but you should do your darndest to not judge yourself. The other thing you want to do if you're finding yourself facing a lot of this type of resistance is to try to counterbalance it with some outside forces. That is a big reason why I have the once a week video here, because it kind of puts a deadline on me where it doesn't matter how I feel or it doesn't matter how much resistance I have against putting in the video. If it has to be out by Wednesday, then at some point I just have to work on it, which is kind of why I'm here right now. And this one video a week also just really hones in on the perfectionist aspect of it, because it is incredibly easy to just make a video and put it out there. The only reason why it's hard is because you have these expectations, because the minimal amount of work required to put out the video is like 10 minutes. Like you could just record yourself talking about something and then put it out there. But then you put up all these barriers about how you want it to go and how you want the video to be, and it just becomes a lot harder to get started. I think a big part of the reason why I wanted to make this video is just articulate this type of perfectionism for my own sake, because when you just kind of think about it and say it out loud, it sounds so ridiculous. Basically, the reason why it becomes harder to start something or harder to put effort into something is because you want the result to be good. And you kind of just think that intuitively this should be the opposite. If you want the result to be good, then you should be more inclined to put more effort in or do a better job. But as you become invested in the result, it just becomes so much harder to get started because you have all these kind of subconscious ideas going on in your head that just end up being roadblocks for getting started. I think the third thing about this perfectionism that is, again, just really important to keep in mind is that, at least from my experience, it is not about actually doing the thing where it comes in and kind of hinders you. It's about getting started. Because when you're sitting there thinking about getting started, it's just this vague idea. But as soon as you sit down and actually start taking action, then the path forward becomes so much more clear. But sometimes you also just need to get over yourself a little bit and realize that what you put out isn't always going to be perfect or even good. So that's what I try to do with this video. It is definitely not perfect, but at least I got it out there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday.